The world today is busy. It can be loud, demanding, and keep you going around and around each day like a carousel that never slows down enough for you to get off the ride. But God has called us out of this world. It's important to intentionally make the effort to make time for the things that are truly important instead of the things the world tries to keep us busy with. Today, we are going to take a look at what should we make important in our lives, why is it important to make time for those things, and how we can make time in a life that can be overwhelming and busy. Plus, in this week's What's Up With That segment, we'll be taking a look at the books of the gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. What is the point of telling the same story 4 times, and why don't they match up exactly with one another? I'm Kellen Tichenor, and this is the Bumpy Narrow Road. So if we're going to make time for what's important, the first thing we have to ask ourselves is, what is important? Number 1 on that list would be things that are going to have the greatest impact on you and your family. One of these things would be making time for God. Well, why is that important? For one, your kids will follow your example more than they will follow what you tell them. Want your kids to have a healthy prayer life? Pray in front of them and with them. Want them to read their Bible? Let them see you studying the Word. Want them to trust in God and lean on Him in tough times? Have honest conversations about your struggles and how God is holding you. They'll follow your lead. Also, it impacts your outlook on your world. Making time for God through prayer and reading His Word on a consistent basis will help to keep you continually reorienting back on track with things that are important. It helps you to keep the worries of your life in perspective to the eternal, and it helps you to keep your priorities straight. You know an easy way of knowing that it's important to make time for God? Well, Jesus Himself, who is God, regularly made time in His ministry to speak to the Father. I mean, if there's ever been anyone who's ever lived who could have used the excuse, "I've got important things to do," it was Him. But we hear several times in Scripture that not only did He make time for prayer, but He would get up early in the morning and go to secluded places so that He could be alone with the Father. Mark 1:35, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where He prayed. Luke 5:16, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Luke 6:12, one of those days Jesus went out to a mountainside to pray and spent the night praying to God. Other things that have a great impact on you and your family are big decisions that you have to really take time to gather information about and pray about and think through in order to make the best decision that you can. Things like finding and purchasing a home, decisions about your career or business that affect your availability to your family, deciding whether or not to try for more children. These are things that will shape your marriage and how your kids grow up. The filter I always kind of put through my mind is, when my kids are my age and they're looking back at their childhood, what are they going to remember? What kinds of memories are they going to have about me? My wife's and my marriage, our home. It helps me to remember that the decisions that I make now don't just affect me, and they don't just affect my family in the present. These decisions have long-term effects on the lives of the people that I love the most. So the first thing on the list of things that are important was the things that have the greatest impact on us or our family. Number 2 is the things that you don't get a chance to do over later. This is things like decisions about your health, making the time for those doctor's appointments that you don't want to go to, or keeping to a relatively healthy diet so that you have the health and the energy to be the person that you want to be for your family and do the things that you want to do. Another example of something you don't get to do over is making time for your marriage or your relationship leading to marriage. If you're not married yet, it's about going deeper than, do you like talking to this person or do you like the way they look? It's about getting to the heart of who they are as a person. What are their values? Where are they in their walk of faith? What are their needs? What are their strengths? What are their goals? How do you complement each other as people? It also involves being vulnerable with them, sharing your answers to those questions as well. And this takes time. But it may save you a lot of time by helping you truly find the person that God has intended for you to be with, rather than potentially spending years or even decades in a bad relationship. Now, if you are married, this involves constant communication with your spouse. What are their goals and aspirations in life, and how can you help them or support them in that? What are they struggling with, and what ways can you be there for them? It also involves communicating to them your goals and aspirations, what you're excited about, or what are you struggling with, and what do you need? Another thing is making time for your kids, listening to their crazy stories, watching them do that one thing they keep on calling you to watch them, even though you're not particularly interested. My son likes to bottle flip, and he wants me to watch him every 2 seconds. Not super exciting. I can't say that. Actually, sometimes it actually is exciting, but just take the time to do it. Taking the time to read with them, taking the time to teach them why what they did was wrong and how they can do it differently next time, giving them hugs and telling them that you love them. The time passes incredibly fast, and you don't get do-overs. So in a nutshell, it's time with God, time with your spouse, time with your kids, and time with yourself. Here's what the Bible teaches us about prioritizing our time. Luke 12:29-31 says, "And do not seek what you are to eat and what you are to drink, nor be worried. For all the nations of the world seek after these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Instead, seek his kingdom, and these things will be added to you." So, why is it important to make time? Well, number one, because you aren't guaranteed the time later. A couple of years ago, I found out that I have a small brain tumor in my brain. The doctor said that because it's deep in my cerebellum near the brainstem, it would be hard to cut through that much brain tissue to get even a sample for a biopsy without potentially causing some significant damage to my motor function. So they told me that since the tumor didn't seem to be affecting me right now, we will just do some scans periodically to monitor the tumor and make sure there are no changes. Well, let me tell you, knowing that you have something inside of you that you might never have to do anything about, or you could need brain surgery at any time, or even cancer, it makes you really take a long, deep stare into the eyes of your mortality. You start thinking about everything in terms of, what if I'm not here next year? And what am I going to leave behind for my wife and my kids? Which, to be honest, wasn't necessarily all bad for me, because the things that used to be such a big deal in my mind suddenly seem much smaller. The things that I wanted to do but didn't do out of fear of failing or looking stupid, or simply because I thought I'd have more time to do it later, I started taking those things off the back burner and putting them in the front. God used something scary and unsettling as a brain tumor to help me grow into the person that I'm meant to be, to push me past my own fears and procrastination, focus on the things that are truly important in my life, and grow closer in relationship with him. The thing is, we shouldn't need to have these types of scared straight moments to give us that motivation and focus to live a life with meaning and purpose. Because the reality is, the future is not promised to anyone. I read the other day about a group of guys that were hunting in the woods, and for some reason they decided that they wanted to chase a bear up a tree. So if I told you that someone died in this situation, you probably would think it was due to the bear mauling someone to death, but you'd be wrong, actually. Tragically, someone died because they chased the bear up the tree, and then someone decided to shoot the bear in the tree while they were looking up and staring at it. The bear fell down, landing on one of the men, and killed him. So you might be thinking, okay, well, no problem. I can't imagine myself in a scenario where I'd be close enough to a bear for it to fall on me and kill me. Well, okay, I read another story where a man had to use the restroom. There was something wrong in the plumbing of the toilet where the water pressure in the pipes was extremely high. You can probably see where I'm going with this one. He flushed the toilet, something we all do each time we go to the bathroom, with the exception of maybe my children. And instead of the gentle swoosh that usually follows it, all of that accumulated pressure, well, the toilet exploded, and it sent shards of porcelain everywhere, including into the man's body. Now, thankfully, this man survived the incident after receiving like 30 stitches, but it goes to show you that things can happen during even the most mundane tasks. Now I could use heart attacks or car accidents as examples, but I'm, trying to keep it a little bit light here and not get too dark. But we don't need to live every day like it's our last, because I don't think it's possible to live in that mindset. And even if we could, I'm not sure it'd be particularly healthy. When I received my diagnosis, there was a period of time where I was thinking about death constantly. But I also had to use my time and energy and mental focus on the things that I needed to do each day. So gradually, thoughts about death and my mortality actually got pushed back further in my mind so that I could focus on what I needed to do. So rather than saying, live your days if it's going to be your last, like you hear sometimes, I would say more like live every day in a way that you wouldn't be disappointed in yourself if you died tomorrow. As usual, Scripture says it best. James 4:13 through 15 says, "Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business, and make money. Why, you don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that." So the second reason why it's important to make time is because if you don't intentionally make time, it won't just happen by itself. You would think that since we know that certain things are important, we would just naturally, unconsciously make time for those things. No, it takes constant, conscious effort to keep our focus on what is important in the long term. The struggle can often be against the immediate demands of everyday life, and there are certainly real demands. It's not as if we can ignore these things that we need to do each day to solely focus on the bigger picture, but it's a balancing act. It's doing the things necessary to keep our lives going without getting lost and enveloped in the monotony. One thing that I've found helps is to make lower level, recurring decisions more routine so that you don't have to spend the time or brain power on them all the time. Perhaps we'll explore that a little bit further in a future episode, but the point is that it takes intentional effort to make time for what's important. So, how do we make time in a busy life? Number one, schedule times to do specific activities and make that time sacred. And that last part is crucial because there's always going to be something that tries to demand that you use your planned time to take care of some emergency, or worse, you'll want to just willingly give up your time to relax or unwind. Which sounds reasonable enough, but relaxing or unwinding usually consists of scrolling or binge watching, or as I like to call it, turning your brain into mush. Instead, when you make a decision to create a time to do something, try really hard to stick to it. If someone asks you if you're free during that time, don't be afraid to say no. Not maybe, or I'll have to check, because you don't want to disappoint them, but a definitive no to hold yourself to that decision. This isn't just me saying this. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said in Matthew 5:37, all you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. I'm not saying to be completely inflexible, but there needs to be a high level of importance placed on the time you've set aside. After all, you made the time for a reason, so don't disappoint yourself. Also, replace bad or pointless activities with meaningful ones. An obvious one is social media. You don't have to cut off social media altogether, but you can go into your phone settings and see how much time you've spent on certain apps. And if you're spending more time on TikTok than you do with your spouse, your kids, with God, or on yourself, then you may want to consider swapping some of that time out. Another thing is create traditions. Holiday traditions like baking cookies, special decorations like an advent calendar or advent wreath, making decorations with the kids is a good one to do. You can also have monthly traditions. In my family, we do Sundays where we all make our own ice cream sundaes on the last Sunday of each month, which is pretty nice. I like it. I think the kids like it too. But you can also have weekly traditions. We do a fancy breakfast every Saturday morning, and we plan at the beginning of the month what the different breakfasts will be throughout the month. And it's really a great time where we all get to sit down together as a family at the table and have good conversations and laugh. And it just makes Saturday mornings like my favorite time of the week. Another thing to do when you want to make sure that you keep time sacred is to write it down. If you're like me, things planned in your head will be gone and out of your mind about as soon as they're thought up. So write down in your monthly planner if you have one, or if you have a calendar on your fridge, write it down there, or add it to your phone's calendar. Or if you're like me, do all three of those things, or try different things and see what sticks best. The important thing is to find something that works for you and stay with it. So make time today for the things that really matter in life. Take the time to explore what exactly that looks like for you, plan out how you're going to make the time, and then get busy living your life intentionally with purpose and meaning. Now it's time for the What's Up With That segment. So today we're discussing the Gospels. What's up with the Gospels? Why tell the same story multiple times? And how come they don't all say exactly the same thing? Well, first of all, if you're not familiar with the term the Gospels, it refers to the first 4 books of the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Each book is written by a different person, telling the story of Jesus' time on earth from their perspective. Each book describes the life of Jesus, his teaching and miracles, his death and resurrection. So why tell the same story multiple times? Have you ever heard about something you weren't there for? So you have to talk to multiple people to try to get the full picture of what happened? Well, each person is going to give you a slightly different version of what happened based off of a multitude of factors, such as what were they focused on, what they actually saw or who they talked to, their vocabulary and their personality, which is going to affect how they are going to tell the story. But the more people that you talk to, the fuller picture you get of what happened typically. Not only that, but there is probably 1 or 2 people's accounts that is going to really resonate with you the most and will be the story that you remember the most. I see that with the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, written by very different people. The book of Matthew is written by the Apostle Matthew, who was a former tax collector before following Jesus. His account of Jesus is very detail-oriented, analytical, and systematic with a very structured writing style. In fact, he begins the book by listing the entire genealogy of Jesus all the way back to Abraham. Matthew is also very good about going to Old Testament text and extracting the portions of Scripture that were fulfilled in Jesus. The book of Mark is written by John Mark, who also journeyed with Paul and Barnabas on their missionary trips. This book is the shortest of the Gospels, in part because it is also the most fast-paced account of the story, with greater emphasis on action-heavy parts of the life of Jesus, such as his miracles, rather than providing a detailed accounting of his sermons. The book of Luke is written by Luke the evangelist, who was a physician and another companion of the Apostle Paul. Being a physician, Luke's approach to the gospel comes from a very extensive and careful study of the facts and the people that were witnesses to what had happened. And because of this, there are certain stories and parables in the book that aren't in the other gospel accounts. The book of Luke is rich in compassion and emphasizes the fact that the teachings of Jesus are for everyone, not just the Jews. The book of John is written by John the Apostle and is the most emotionally expressive and poetic book of the Gospels. John writes with deep theology and philosophy and is a master of language, writing with rich meaning, metaphor, and literary themes. So here are 4 very different people writing in 4 very different ways from very different viewpoints. And one of the great things about the Gospels is that because the 4 books are so different, different kinds of people are going to connect to each book in a different way. I actually think that different denominations of Christianity can kind of work in the same way. Certain people are going to be more comfortable in certain atmospheres and approaches to praising God. Maybe it's not that there is one denomination that is correct and the rest are wrong. Maybe it's just that God is using different kinds of churches to reach different kinds of people. So why tell the same story multiple times? To get a fuller picture of the life of Jesus and tell the story in a way that is going to resonate with you, no matter who you are. So how come they don't all say exactly the same thing? So differences in writing styles is one thing, but what's up with the differences in the stories of the Gospels, such as differences in things like the number of people that had demons cast out of them, or difference in the wording of some of Jesus' sermons or parables, and differences in the order in which some events occurred. So there are a few important things to keep in mind here. When it comes to the specifics of the number of certain things or the exact wording of something in Jesus' sermons, we need to remember that what I just mentioned before about the differences in writing styles of the authors. Numbers in ancient writings could refer to the actual specific number, but numbers were also used a lot as a symbolism. They were used very symbolically. The number 3, for instance, represents the completeness of something, like the Trinity of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Jesus prayed 3 times in the garden the night he was arrested. There are 27 books in the New Testament, which is 3 to the 3rd power. There are only 3 angels mentioned in the Bible, Michael, Gabriel, and Lucifer. Then there's the number 7, or multiples of 7, which symbolizes completeness or perfection. 7 days in a week, 7 days of creation, the 7 churches of Asia, and the 7 spirits of God in Revelation. Adversely, the number 6 symbolizes incompleteness and imperfection. That's why the mark of the beast in Revelation is 666. It's the number 6, imperfection, listed 3 times, the number 4, completeness. So the beast is completely imperfect and incomplete. There's also a lot of symbolism in numbers and multiples of numbers like 10, which symbolizes complete order. Think the 10 Commandments. 12, which represents the completeness of structure and authority. Think the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 disciples. And readers during the time that they read these things would have a better understanding and be more familiar with this type of symbolism. But because we don't use this type of symbolism today, we seem to prefer, to be beat over the head with bluntness and exactness. We have a little bit more trouble recognizing it. So it's important to keep in mind that when we see these numbers in not only the Gospels, but in the whole Bible, they aren't always intended to be taken literally. The other thing to keep in mind is what I mentioned before about perspective. Take the instance in the book of Matthew where Jesus heals 2 demon-possessed men, where the books of Mark and Luke only mention 1 man. Matthew, as we talked about, is very detail-oriented, so it would make sense that he focused on the exact number of men healed. The books of Mark and Luke, on the other hand, put more focus on the miraculousness of the healing. The fact that they focus on one of the men in the account, perhaps the one with the more spectacular or dramatic healing, doesn't mean that they disagree with Matthew's account. Then when it comes to things like the words used in Jesus' sermons, or things like how many people were fed in the miracles of the feeding of the thousands with the fish and bread, we have to keep in mind that there were probably many, many, many miracles and sermons that were not written about at all. In fact, at the end of the book of John, he writes in John 21:25, Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose then not even the whole world would have enough room for the books that would be written. Again, notice the allegory. But the reason why this is important is because when Matthew records Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, it doesn't mean that that was the only time Jesus gave that sermon. Jesus and the disciples traveled all over the region preaching, teaching, and performing miracles. So if the verbiage the one book uses to quote a sermon from Jesus differs a bit from another, it doesn't mean that one of them got it wrong. It certainly could be just a recorded account from a different time that Jesus gave that sermon. And the same goes for the number of people fed in the miracle of the feeding of the multitude. All 4 Gospels have the feeding of the 5,000, while only Matthew and Mark, the most detail-oriented book and the most miracle-focused book, have the feeding of the 4,000. And even these accounts differ in the number of baskets of leftovers. Again, does that mean that some of the accounts got it wrong? Not at all. They are just different accounts of different miracles. Now, as far as the order of events, the gospel accounts seeming to place things in a different order. The simple thing to remember here is that ancient writings did not place as much importance on the order of the events as much as they did the content of the events. This is especially apparent in the book of Revelation, where time seems to like jump from past to present to future, and then to past and present and future all at the same time, and then back to the past. In Darrell Johnson's book, Discipleship on the Edge, he writes, "It is important to emphasize this series of windows, this series of visions, does not progress in chronological order. That is, the events depicted in the images are not presented in the order in which they happened historically. They're presented in the order in which John saw them. Then I saw, then I saw, then I heard, then I saw." We are not to ask what happens next, but rather, what did John see next? That's because what John sees next may not be what happens next. So similarly, when we read the Gospels, we should read it in the mindset of this happened, and this happened, and this happened, rather than this happened, then this happened, then this happened. So differences in the Gospels don't mean that someone made a mistake and recorded something wrong. All 4 Gospels are divinely inspired writings. God used the strengths of 4 very different people to write about and share the good news about Jesus to a world in a way that would resonate with a wide variety of people, even thousands of years later. And that's what's up with the Gospels. Well, that's it for this week. It's my prayer that this episode and that this podcast will help you on this bumpy, narrow road as we try to navigate this fallen world with all of our imperfections, but leaning on the one who is perfect and can make us right with him. I pray that God would use this time to draw you closer to him, whether you are already a believer or if you're still on a journey of faith. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'll see you next week.